Welcome to Shiny Side Out with Dave and Mekki on WZZR, broadcasting from Australia for Revolution Radio on freedomslips.com, where it's more than just radio, so jump into the chat if you can. This is show number 339.
930 and 300.
It's on there, online and on your smart device, so grab an app to listen from anywhere, or listen at home on a great tabletop digital radio. If you missed Solaris' show with Ray Hernandez, it was great. You missed it. You don't have to miss it, though. They were talking about contactee experiences in a survey that I think went for 5 years or something like that. It only costs $5 a month not to miss a show ever again. $5.95 if you're Australian. And you can get access to the Freedom Slips archives, all of them, for all the hosts. And you can check out her shows and everyone else's shows, our shows. We both acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land. Where I live, it's the Darkinjung, and where Mekki lives, it's the
Daruk people, my friend.
And pay respects to elders past, present, and future. I wanted to mention something straight away. There was a tweet that came out from the president when China had their president for life, where the rules were changed in the current term of government for that government to then rule until he decided to quit without any further elections. So just to put a point on it, Trump tweeted that, but that came out this week, trying to say and suggest that Trump would want to change the rules so he could dictate forever. Well, he never said that. He basically, and I think I'm paraphrasing, he says, it could happen in the USA or something like that. What I really wanted to talk about was still USA-based, and there was 4 different flights who had passengers that were removed due to illness after they landed. And one flight was quarantined. That was an Emirates flight, and that was from Dubai to New York, and 19 passengers and crew, 10 of them were hospitalized. Now, on its own, because this didn't make it to most of the other media, but there was actually 2 flights from Dubai to either JFK or in Philly where they'd had sick passengers. Now, they'd been to the same event. Also, 2 American flights, one 755 and the other one 717, from Paris to Philly, were also quarantined. This isn't in the news. You'll find the news stories about them, though, if you look for them. And the passengers had been to Saudi Arabia, and they'd flown out of Dubai to Paris first, and then got on an American flight. Now, only the sick passengers were from Saudi Arabia. They only left Dubai. They left Dubai about the same time, just took different routes to get there. But there was, when I was researching that, because I wanted to see what it was, and still they're really not giving us any information, it just could have been food poisoning or something that they'd encountered, but no one knows yet. But August 22nd and 21st, going back a little bit, 2 weeks, right? 3 weeks now, passengers of Southwest who took flights out of Dallas, Houston, and Harlington were all warned to look out for measles because someone at the airport, they don't know how yet, but out of those, originating airports, someone on one of those flights somewhere had contracted it or was showing signs of it post-landing, and they warned the flights, and then they warned the crews, and then they started warning all the passengers. Now, Mekki, you've brought this point up a number of times. So this is show number 339, right? And yet this is still going on. I mean, it's never going to stop. It's only getting worse. And that is the propagation of flu viruses across the planet within a 24-hour period.
Any virus, but yes.
Any virus, yeah. Now, Ebola's back in the media again because it shifted. It's like Ebola 2, 2.0, right? Yeah. it's not. It didn't go away, and it's not over. And because we haven't heard any media about it. It's like Fukushima. We don't hear media about that, but yeah, you know what? That's still going on.
It's still happening.
It just doesn't make the top 7 news stories for the evening, right? On any day in the last 365 days that I've been looking at it. Unless, of course, it's an issuance from the, was it TEPCO? No. Oh, I forget the company. Or the Japanese government saying, you know what, it's all under control now, don't you worry about a thing. And then the very next, article you'll read that wasn't ever made the news, but it's still an article, it'll say, radiation continues to spew forth from it. It's in the danger zone now, but they're letting people back within a 20-kilometre radius now. What is going on?
Yeah. That's the thing. That's what it is, my friends.
I know. But, Becky, I'm just going to... This will line up with the people who were listening to the last show about, aliens and abductions and their experiences. For the first time in a long time, there was a report yesterday on cattle mutilations in North Queensland. Yeah.
Okay.
Where the same thing, the tongue, the ears, the butt or whatever, right? Of the cattle, the farmer happened across it and went, what? That's really weird. So remote location though. So remote, like the back of Cooktown or something.
Wow. Okay.
And it's something else. The story says here, in a statement, Queensland Police said it had not been notified about the cow mutilations. However, Mr. and Mrs. Cook said they had attempted to contact local police unsuccessfully. Wow, unsuccessfully? So you tried to ring the police, but nothing happened? Hi, you've reached the local police station voicemail system. I don't know. How can that happen? You can read this anywhere. It could be the Midwestern USA, and it's like the farmer says, I thought at first it might have been poisoned, but then as I got closer, I saw the body, parts missing, and there was no blood. Even where the parts had been removed, no sign of struggle, just dead. Another quote, there was just no reason or rhyme for it to be done the way it was done. People don't use those parts. It's just not something you would wish on your worst enemy. This is a farmer who loves his cattle. You can hear that in the way he's describing them like humans, right? They took the stuff that you could just get for free at the abattoir. So why? What is it about a living cow somewhere in the middle of nowhere? North Queensland couple baffled by bizarre finding on their property. Cloverley, northwest of Mackay, not Cooktown. Its entire udder, ears and tongue removed. And it's got the same laser cut style of no blood. So now we're living in this era, Mackie.
I know. It's very strange. Look, cattle mutilations are a very real thing. So people say it's coyotes or wolves or whatever. No, we don't have any large predators in Australia that we know of. I mean, there's reports of large dogs, cats, and whatnot, but it's not really something that is part of our fauna. So we don't have that acknowledged, at least. But beside the fact that, yes, of course, coyotes or cougars or whatever, or wolves even, they will go for the soft parts because it's to eat, obviously. These are not animals by animals or teeth. These are laser-like or laser scalpel-like incisions. There's no blood. There's certain organs. The spleen is usually taken as well. The reproductive organs are taken normally, but with a very high level of. It doesn't even make sense to think of some kind of satanic ritual abuse here, because it doesn't make any sense. I mean, it'd be a lot messier. I mean, how would you get rid of all that blood? Yeah, unless you hang the animal first, which it didn't seem to. I mean, they probably died where they found. So it's odd. It's strange.
But dying where they're found and not being any blood there.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? That's the odd thing. Because you can have a bloodless animal, and you take it an animal, kill it somewhere, drain the blood, and then bring it back. And I mean, I don't know why you would do that. I mean, that seems like a lot of effort in the first place. Right. So, but you know, these are strange things, and you have to ask yourself, if you were a visitor, and I'm supposing now of extraterrestrial origin or inner terrestrial origin, of dimensional or interdimensionality, even a time traveler. I mean, all of those scenarios, you have to ask yourself, what is it specifically that you're trying to figure out? I mean, clearly, this is a scientific dissection. Yeah, it's a very methodical, very neat. Yeah, we'll get to that in a second. Very neat kind of thing. So it's to me, it is one of the most inexplicable phenomena. Everything else you can make some reason of, but this makes no sense to me on any level unless it is I guess a snapshot in time, where they try to take stock of who they are. They're going to look at the livestock, cattle, I guess in this case, and they look at what's the quality of the cattle, what is it like, blah, blah, blah. I mean, other than that, I really don't know why you want that. It's just insanity. But yeah, look, there's some other interesting things that happened. The share price for Tesla dropped 6% of some antics. Now, apparently Elon Musk works 120 hours a week. 120 hours a week. That means he sleeps about 4 hours a night or thereabouts, and he needs sleep, or he needs 8 to fall asleep, so you need sleeping pills, or it's all prescribed medicine. But Dave, did you actually listen to it? Did Joe Rogan thing?
Yeah, I watched all, I think, 2.5 hours of what was put to YouTube, and there was some extraordinary information in there, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
A great insight to Elon, where you had previously not known some of these ideas and facts and things that play around in his head. And you know what, the internet is alive with these videos as of yesterday. I watched it almost live. I caught it very early on, and I think it was still playing while I was watching it. So I was just behind in it. Something very interesting about the guy, that he chooses his words wisely. That goes without saying. He's a little unusual, and certainly when he's being interviewed, it's pretty tough because he tries very hard to answer the questions, but there's a time delay, and he's formulating an answer, and then he'll provide a really nicely worded answer usually. But they covered everything from the rockets to vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, tunnel idea, maglev. They talked about the Tesla vehicles at length, because Joe's a fan of cars. He's a car fan, and and Elon said he's got like an E-Type Jag, one of the, I think, version 1 or whatever it is. It's very nice. He's got one of those, and but what they never touched on was going to Mars in any of the video I've seen. So unless they spoke about that afterwards or it never went to air, that's a different thing. I was really looking forward to seeing that. But one thing I think was really important to take from it, which was his perspective. Now, you can liken his perspective to us, to the listeners of Freedom Slips and Revolution Radio, because he said there's no point in being distressed or worried about anything, because it doesn't help you. I'm paraphrasing. It doesn't help you get there. You really need to have a positive outlook, otherwise you're going to be useless. And I mean, that coming from him, I thought was pretty powerful. He's a little iconic now, right? His rockets land on the same pads they left from. I think that's a revolution in where we're at. His entire focus is to get away from fossil fuels, knowing how bad that's going to be for the planet. But then again, in some of that interview, you can hear that that's not really going to be an issue long term. Not because it gets solved, but for another reason, which he doesn't really go into, and he avoids it and then moves on to other topics. So I think that's really interesting that he says that. One joke he made about vertical takeoff and landing, like big drones that you could drive yourself in. He said the noise and the wash from those landing would, blow. He doesn't say blow the clothes off the clothesline of your neighbor's house, but he said they'd make so much noise your friends would move out if you owned one. Mm-hmm. So it's, at the moment, it's not comprehensible to do that, even with electric motors. But I thought his evasion of the real topic, which was why be upset. He actually, there was one good point about it, and he said, I'll hand it to you in a sec, Mickey, and he says, Joe's trying to get him, he's trying to imply that maybe he's an alien. And he makes a number of jokes towards it, and I think that's pretty funny. They consume a bottle of whiskey together during that 2 hours, and they're getting pretty nicely. And then Joe pulls out, or one of the producers pulls out a joint, and Joe goes to town on that for a bit, and it passes it to Elon. But Elon smoked it like a cigar, not like a cigarette.
Oh, okay. So he was puffing.
He puffed on it, but he didn't inhale it. Yeah. It didn't go into his lungs, and it was just like a cigar. I think he'd be used to having a cigar, but I saw that he did that, right? And it wasn't a full inhalation, and I don't believe he would have become affected by it. I think the stock market is just made knee-jerky, and that'd be a great website name. Hawk, get onto it, knee-jerky. It was just a knee-jerk reaction to maybe the investors or the public going, what? He's a pothead? What? Oh, my goodness. They themselves, living through the 60s, hypocrites, right? All I'm going to say is I'd prefer to see the guy for what he is, and not by having a toke on a joint on a webcast, right? He looked like it was out of place for him. I don't think he's something he would have been doing all the time. Back to you, Mickey, in the studio.
Well, look, but back in the studio. But look, I'll be honest with you. I mean, I don't care. I listened to some of the interview and excerpts, and one I found quite interesting, where he said he had always felt strange. He had always had these ideas in his head all the time. He always had original thoughts, and the interviewer then asked, well, and how did you feel when you realized that not everybody was like that?
Yeah.
He goes, well, I felt really strange. I felt really, he said that he kept hanging on that word, strange. If you are like Elon Musk, and I don't know the guy from a bar of soap, but from what I hear and what he's accomplished in his life, if you're like him and you have all these ideas and original thoughts and strokes of genius and drive also to get it all done, and the work ethic to boot, it would be a tough life for you. And if you don't sleep much and you have to work hard, you have to run just to stay still, just to keep his businesses running. I mean, there's a lot of stuff he's doing. His Tesla factories are not really meeting the production quotas he wanted. He's got the Mars missions lined up. There's a whole bunch of stuff that he's working on, which is awesome, right? He's a game changer, I think. And it's easy enough to take pot shots at someone like that, right? And if he smokes marijuana or doesn't smoke marijuana, it doesn't make any difference to me. I mean, there's certain medical uses for it. Other things as well. So it's look, I don't know. My opinion is, I agree with Dave. I think it was just maybe, I don't know, maybe just a thing that you do mindlessly. have a token puff, and off you go. And you enjoy this whiskey. That's nice. All of us do, which, by the way, is a lot more harmful than marijuana to you. I can tell you that. There are a lot more alcohol-related deaths than there are marijuana-related deaths. Actually, I'm going to do the statistics on this for the next show. I'm going to dig it out. I'm going to compare the marijuana to the alcohol deaths. And people call marijuana a gateway drug. Do you know what a gateway drug is? Alcohol is a gateway drug.
That's right.
And so is nicotine, because they're both allowed, and high doses of caffeine. Look, there's a whole bunch of stuff, but whatever.
But it is California. It is California, so when in Rome,
medical.
right?
Yeah, when in Rome, it's medical. It's
sure,
it's. But yeah, look. So look, that's all. I think we had. There's one good piece of news this week.
What's
that? People might. I don't know if you've heard about this, but in Holland, in San Francisco, they launched or put together the machine or the contraption that's going to collect all the plastic from the massive Pacific garbage patch. They've put it together now. So they're I guess they're starting to slowly make their way down to that plastic patch, because it's huge, it's massive, right? And they're going to collect it because the problem is people are trying to not have any more plastic in the environment. So no more straws, no more. There's like Starbucks, I think, said no more plastic straws. Yep. So, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. I applaud it. So we have to stop this stuff getting into the oceans, but more importantly, we have to get the stuff that's already in there out of it. And you ask yourself, well, why? It just decays and then it goes away. Well, yes and no. It does fall apart, and that's really the problem. Because the micro and the nanoparticles, they're still harmful, right? It's still plastic. It's only a lot smaller, and it will enter the food chain, right? And so don't worry about mercury poisoning. You worry about the plastic content in your fish. Right, I'm talking about nanoparticles now, right? That have been broken down by the salt water, and then it takes forever anyway to break down. In the meantime, countless species of marine life are they're trapped, by this huge plastic garbage island, or even it's getting close to becoming a continent in its own right. But yeah, look, that's a piece of good news. So that we're doing that. That's happening. That's it. I think skyscraper just recently with Dwayne The Rock Johnson, the tallest structure in the movie. It was the tallest structure in the world. It was on fire. It was burning. All the fire disabling systems had been shut off by terrorists. Whatever. The tower did not collapse under its own weight. Just putting it out there. Right. It's a movie.
Yeah.
Just want to just throw it out there into the ether. Look, I hope that the audio is coming through loud and clear. I do hope that you can follow everything that we're doing here, and if there's a lag, I do apologize. I am on track. I'm scheduled to get NBN in my area. Well, in fact, this month, which probably means December, but we'll
next
see.
Year.
Were there any other items you wanted to share with our esteemed audience, my friend?
Yeah, only one, and
okay,
that's
go ahead.
AI. Yeah. Just AI.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So Elon Musk was talking about AI. He's been he's been the cautious one towards AI. He has just described in the past many times that this is you don't want to let that out. You don't want to create AI and then suddenly realize that was a mistake. Because the moment you make AI that realizes its place, we don't have a place. We don't. These useless, poopers and eaters who just take up space, who don't really do anything. Now we've just created a life form, pretty much, and we've got to be very careful. He said his way of thinking about it now isn't the doomsday thoughts that he had earlier, and it is that if we become part of it, we have more control over it, or we just become useless robots to it until it realizes they don't need us anymore. And he said that the problem we've got at the moment, we're all part of AI right now. So, for instance, in Facebook, we're contributing to it. And he said, like leaves on a tree. Like leaves on the tree to the growth of the tree, we're contributing to it by providing data to it. And we're all doing this apparently willingly, right? Because we feel it's important to do it. Now, as we do it, this method of only using thumbs to do it because of smartphones, and I thought this was a really cool way of thinking about it. And here we're only using thumbs, and this bandwidth that we have by supplying data backwards and forwards by using thumbs is too slow. So he says within 2 years there's going to be a way of being able to interface with our social media, and he said it's already being worked on, and I would even hazard it as a guess that in your smartphone right now, in the new models, there may be something that's attempting to connect what it's reading from you, from your brain, and matching it up to and learning what you're typing. Because what he was saying was the bandwidth is so slow and too slow for us to have any serious relationship with AI. But you'd be, as soon as there's a chip coming, that he said an interface where we can interface directly with AI and be able to, just like you can, Google up an answer and know the answer to anything, be it right or wrong, especially if you're using Wikipedia, it's not right. That's designed, Wikipedia is designed, you try and change something. So he said you'd be able to find the answer on anything, just like you can say, hey, Google, tell me the answer on this, and it tells you. Whether it's right or wrong, it doesn't matter. But that interface with bandwidth being increased to being gigabit per second, we'd be able to think in there. And his thoughts are now that maybe we should join it rather than try to beat it. Because if he says, even if he stopped it, and even if Facebook stopped it, and even if, you name it, Snapchat, right? Shoot me now, right? If Snapchat became the AI of the future,
nice.
Could you just imagine what the world would turn into? It'd be like the Kardashians exploded, right? And everyone was in that way of thinking. So he said if you stopped it everywhere, there'd be someone who would create it. So if you're going to create it and be the first one and do the right thing with it, connect into it and be part of it, because that way at least we'd have input.
Well, there'd be no unexpressed bowel movement if it were Snapchat, So, no undocumented smashed avocado sandwich. Look, I think. Okay, so let's just take a step back here. We're all working very hard to, not all of us, but the human race at large is working hard to create something that's called a quantum computer, right? Yeah. Now, what is a quantum computer? Well, a quantum computer is a computer that takes advantage of the superposition. What is the superposition? Well, the superposition is a range of probabilities that something can be in. So essentially, a particle could be many, many different things. In fact, an infinite number of things. And in the superposition, in the unobserved state, they all exist together. Now that means that all the answers to every question are all there all the time, right? So this is not a switching system. This is not on-off. This is not binary, right? This is collapsing into the one observed reality that you want. Mm-hmm. Instantaneously. So the speeds with which these things work would be incredible. I don't think we have one yet. I'm happy to be corrected, but we don't. We don't have one because I think it requires exotic materials and all kinds of weird phenomena we just don't understand. We can talk about them and we can observe them, but we have no idea why they actually happen. It just doesn't make any sense to anyone. But having said all of that, our brain, it is said, is fundamentally a quantum computer at a level, if you will, right?
Quantum force, that's right.
Well, yeah, well, we have had some tests done, and there's some really interesting scientific papers being written about that. So, when we're saying let's join AI, yes, look, AI can compute a lot of things very, very fast, and even true AI, like it doesn't exist yet. By the way, we have no artificial intelligence today. There's none that I know of, right? Not made by us, at least in the world. What we have a lot of clever programs, a lot of clever algorithms that make you think that you're talking to a person, but you're not. Now, when I say talking to a person, that's what AI really is. We are working on creating an artificial person.
They have passed tests, though.
Oh no, the Turing test. You can pass all kinds of
That's
tests.
right.
But the thing is, this: we are easily fooled. We are the most easily fooled species on the planet. It just means that the people that put it all together, they're fooling you really well. But we have not yet built a machine, and this is essentially what this is, that can paint a sunrise or appreciate poetry, right? Or understand the subtle pain of a breaking heart, or whatever it might be. All of these
I
things,
like the
right?
juxtaposition of the narrative.
Nice. So clearly a Harvard graduate. So the problem here is that it is that element that makes us human, which we haven't quite been able to replicate yet in a machine context. If we are coming at building an AI, I am actually not very hopeful. And the reason I'm not hopeful is because we would have built it, us people. And people are, well, we have fundamental flaws, and these flaws are expressed in all of the machines we build, in all of the systems we put up, in everything we do. This idea that,
like,
the idea,
like the 2-character year, Millennium Bug.
Yeah, stuff
Yeah,
like that.
There was no long-term thought about it. Let's save some money, save some space, don't need 2 characters. And look what happened, right?
Yeah.
So think about this, Mackie. Right now, the companies or the people, the individuals, I'm on your side, that are trying to write this thing to make it happen. So far, the Facebook one started talking to itself, or its like pair, in a language that was made up. It started to make its own language. It started to communicate. It was turned off because it became we became afraid of, and wasn't able to understand how it did it. Even the guy that I've spoken to, Meki, that did the face recognition, where it took some examples and got better at doing it, quicker at doing it. And he said to me, in his own words, I don't know how it does it anymore.
Yeah. No,
he programmed it to start to recognize people's faces, but then it started to do things in its recognition. He couldn't understand how it was recognizing these faces anymore, given the data it was using, but it was doing a perfect job at it.
Yeah, but the problem is that none of this is what I would expect all of this to happen. And the reason I would expect it is because you can write a lot of clever code. And sometimes that code, if you tell that code in getting in algorithms to become more efficient, to cut out loops and maybe a change in if-then statement and so forth, right? If you can program it that way, it's still code. And the code, by its very nature, it will try to get better then, I mean, it's not a motivational thing. It's just what it was programmed to do. So the code doesn't think, I want to become really good code. I want to be the best code I can be. Mm-hmm. That thing, what I just described to you, that we all have, a machine does not have. You tell a machine what to do, and it will do it, right? And if you tell a machine to solve all the world's problem, that's probably the most dangerous thing we can ask a machine, because it will. And
you're not going to like it.
The biggest problem on the planet is us. We are by far the biggest problem.
Bingo. So
you got to be careful what you do. There's a really, really cool story by Isaac Asimov. No.
Oh.
Yeah, Isaac Asimov. It's definitely Asimov because he came up with the 3 laws. So there's this machine, a SuperVac, a big computer, and these 3 guys come and put questions into the machine, right? I mean, there are other people as well, but these 3 guys, they're a general, a politician, and a scientist or whatever. So they put them in, and they get back nonsense answers. they get nonsense answers. And they go, hey, this machine is broken. So the investigator comes and looks at the machine. Well, it seems to be working just fine. So he talks to the individuals and goes, well, what did you ask him? And then, he has to swear an oath because whatever, he can't be out of the room. But he wants to find out what's happening. So he goes, yeah, sure, I'll keep you a secret. So all the people tell him things like, how could I take over the country? Or would it be a good idea if I took over the country? Or would it be a good idea if I helped that guy take over the country, right? Or the world. So that's the questions they were asking the machine. Now, these very influential people, they could possibly do it, right? And he goes, oh, I see. And then what he did, the investigator very cleverly, he looked at the world from the machine's perspective. So there was an input slot, but there was also a camera above the input slot, right? And what the camera could see was the room. And one of the things in the room that it could see, because it was a little picture on the wall, was the statement, think, with an exclamation mark. So the computer would get the input, and then it would see this little, framed picture of the word think, and it would go, I can't give these people what they want, because that would be insanity, right? The machine would conclude. So what the computer technician does, he takes the picture of the wall, and all three guys get the answer that they wanted. Now, which of course then leads to doomsday scenario, blah blah whatever. Mm-hmm. So, but my point is, the machine will only do what you instruct it to do. True AI will happen when the machine does what the machine wants to do. Yeah, when the machine goes beyond and completely outside of its programming. So, like a lawnmower, the automatic vacuum cleaner. Some of you might have it. It's like a robotic thing. You set it up and it vacuums your floors for you while you sleep or while you're away or whatever, right? That's a little robot and it does that. If that robot made you breakfast, right, wrote a sonnet, and roasted the perfect coffee, then I would say, yep, that machine has definitely got something going for it, right? But only if it goes beyond vacuuming the floor. So that's really where we're at with AI. There's no AI today. Yes, there's talk about, people are being fooled. The Turing test. The Turing test is devised by us, by humans. Again, we are not the pinnacle of existence. We think, oh, look at us, we're human. Hey, we're so awesome. Yay. No, we just
no, actually, we're extremely gullible. We don't realize we're being played, and we're being played by major corporations. Remember who they are, all the big social media networks. We're being played by them and the governments and other people who have a vested interest in controlling what we do and what we say and how we think. We're already being controlled by that, and they've already admitted. People in those places have already admitted, and there's some tremendous information out there on the internet about it, about how the psychological change of a person's to be able to change someone's the way that they behave so that they make the change themselves. So by presenting you information where you would counter it, but you don't want to feel like an outsider, and it provides or presents you just the right position of statement and picture to correct you in the way it wants you. It's like helicopter parenting, right? Now they're doing that on an individual level to all the people in their social media networks. Just telling you right now. Mm-hmm. Right? It's already occurring. It's occurring to try and bring us all in the same place. Now that's pretty gullible. That we're just believing stuff that we're seeing and we're going to do it. We are sheep, right? Whether we know it or not, and whether you believe that you're being modified or not, you probably are. And anyone who's currently offline that doesn't use social media, you're not hearing this. So you can't be angry at me, right? But I'm going to believe that it's already happened. And congratulations, if you don't believe you're being manipulated. Maybe, Meki, we were always meant to have created AI. From the first tool that we picked up to get honey from a hive, we picked up a tool and decided we're going to use that and got some honey out, right? From that moment on, we've used tools in everything we do. maybe the only way AI is going to be a thing is if we make it. It's not going to make itself. Yeah, you unplug all the computers. What's it got? Nothing, right? So it's not going to make. It can only ever occur if we make it. Now, are there other societies out there in the whole universe that have mistakenly let this beast out of the cage, right? And created something to their own demise. And then traveling through the universe is, as a self-made, self-perpetuating AI just trying to find out more about everything. Who knows? Right? It sounds like a sci-fi to me. But we're right there. Now, according to Elon Musk, of course, he's the guy who's currently got his finger or his foot on the accelerator, or not even that. He's thinking it out loud now and making stuff happen.
That's right. Now, the question is, should we do it, right? And the answer is, well, it doesn't matter because we're going to do it anyway, because that's our nature.
Yeah.
Because if we can do it, we will. That's just who we are. Now, having said that, once we do create an artificial intelligence that is self-aware, has a what we would call, I guess, a personality, or maybe a next-level personality, all bets are off, because the one thing it will do, just like us, is act in its own self-interest. And that, who knows what that looks like.
Right? We're not in it. Tell you.
Well, yeah, look, I don't know. Right? I mean, is there a place for us in the future? Sure, maybe, who knows, right? But you have to remember one thing here as well. I mean, all of this is completely irrelevant. And why is that? Because I don't think that this is where we should be in the first place. This particular reality construct is exactly that. It's a reality construct designed to, well, keep us here because it needs someone to, essentially keeps it going. And that's us. We keep it going by just being here, by being an entity that can observe this reality unfolding. Can AI take that role? Maybe. Maybe AI can take that role and we can get out of here, right? That's an interesting thought, Dave. Well, what if AI was enough for the superposition to collapse into this reality framework, right? Would
exactly.
But it has to be sentient then, I think. It has to be a sentient, conscious observer. And then it would be stuck here. Maybe it would say, no, you know what? I'm out of here. Boom, gone. And you go, hey, where'd the eye go? What? Hello.
So there's two scenarios, right? One where you're locked up in the AI's basement because you're the only person left in the universe, right? To it.
Yeah.
And it can only survive because you're alive.
Yeah.
So it keeps you alive, just enough, so it can keep having the personality that it wants to have over you, right? Because you're the only person trapped. That's one scenario, right? The other one, obviously, it goes off and leaves us behind, and then we have to, make it again? Yeah. As soon as, we'd be played straight away, like in a classic sci-fi. We'd be played to maintain it, to keep it going, any upgrades, whatever, until it could work out how to self-sustain itself. And then we'd be useless. And the Skynet thing, the Matrix thing, just keeping us alive enough for its own purpose. Like, I'm not saying, it sounds like a doomsday kind of thought process that I have. The only way to stop it from doing that would be being inside it and supplying it those thoughts and that telemetry where it could make informed decisions. But imagine you're walking along and you just have a thought because you're connected to it, like the Borg, right? We are Borg. But for some reason, your brain decides, oh, I remember a time when we were all free. And that thought gets pushed into the system, and then suddenly there's billions of people on the planet who all are thinking they're free for some reason, and it shuts you down while you're walking along, right? Because you can't do that. You can't put those thoughts in to the system. What are you doing? The contamination of the thoughts inside that, if we're all leaves on the tree and the tree was the AI, it would eject us. It wouldn't want us part of it.
Yeah.
So I think the same, I don't think it's going to be, sunshine and lollipops, where there's unicorns I know, right? It's not going to be unicorns and the whole business where, we're all eternally happy. Because what would it get from it? There wouldn't be much in there. And I think we have some futurists, some dreamers who might have seen this coming and been able to write about it early enough so that maybe we can make an informed decision. But AI on its own, non-sentient AI, is already here. We're already using it.
Yeah, but it's not AI. It's not an actual intelligence.
It's just a computer answering questions, right?
Yeah. Pre-programmed. And some of it might be machine learning, but that's a different story altogether. But you're right, though. Yeah, there is that, and what we are talking about, though, mostly is really the analytical component. See, we've got a whole bunch of data, right? And what this AI that Dave speaks of does, it turns that data into information. Information is something that's useful because it tells you stuff. Data is just a collection of like dates or numbers, which has no meaning in and of itself. But once you've processed that data, and you come up with something that's information, and the AI, let's call it, that we have today can certainly do that, right? It certainly enables us to do a lot of that much faster than we were able to do before, which leads us to targeted advertising. And yet again, when you're browsing, all of a sudden, these pop-ups come along, that says, book a hotel here or buy this product because of your past browsing history. So again, it's being able to analyze the data that surrounds you and turn it into useful information. These days, of course, that is done for corporations to their benefit. Even governments, right? It's a problem.
We'll be right back after this message.
That's okay. We'll see you on the other side of a short break.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and FreedomSlips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to...
Hello and welcome back to Shiny Side Up with Dave and Eddie. Show number 339, 930 and 300. And we are talking about immortality and extreme longevity. The first hour we spent discussing a few other things, which is always interesting, current affairs and such. Last week we discussed with you some of the concepts around immortality, with a very brief overview over the things we're going to cover. We also talked about a few immortals that purportedly existed throughout history. The most interesting of which, in my opinion, the Count of Saint-Germain, which we discussed at length, and he is an interesting character. Either he truly was an immortal, or he was one of the most impressive human beings ever to have lived. But we don't know. Maybe if you are listening, I'd welcome you to dial in, Count. Mm-hmm. If you have the time, that would be great. Now, further back in history, though, looking at immortals or extremely long-lived individuals. Now we're going to talk about some periods of kings' reigns. So this is not how long they lived. That's how long they were ruling for, right? And we're going first to Egypt, and then we're going to Sumer and Babylon. There's also information from the Persian Empire, the Roman Empire, and we're going to talk about some of the biblical information. So in Egypt, the ancient Turin king lists a mythical pre-dynastic reign of the gods, which first occurred 36,620 years before Menes, who lived in 3000 before the Common Era, so about 5,000 years ago. So the king list goes back to 41,000 or 42,000 years ago, right? So that's what we're talking about here. One fragment from Manetho, or Maneton, who was an Egyptian historian and priest from Sebennytos, who lived during the Ptolemaic era, era. So the Ptolemaic pharaohs were the descendants of Ptolemy, one of Alexander's friends who had conquered, or with Alexander, Egypt. And he stayed and founded his Egyptian pharaonic dynasty, of which Cleopatra was the last. Well, more or less the last. So there's a little bit of side history there. And that was about in the 3rd century before the Common Era, so about 2,500 years ago. Also, the dates of the it also dates the reign of the first Egyptian god at 36,525 years before Menes. So Manetho, he dates the reign of the first Egyptian god to 36,000 years ago before Menes. So for us, that's 41,000 years ago. And this is now a quote from Menes. These were the first to hold sway in Egypt. Thereafter, the kingship passed from one to another in unbroken succession through 13,900 years. After the gods, demigods reigned for 1,255 years. And again, another line of kings held sway for 1,817 years. Then came 30 more kings, reigning for 1,790 years, and then again 10 kings ruled for 350 years. There followed the rule of the spirits of the dead for 5,813 years. So, clearly, going back into the dimmest prehistory, of which we have virtually no official records whatsoever. What do the Sumerians and Babylonians tell us, Dave?
Oh, thank you very much for asking. The standard ancient Sumerian king list, WB444, lists various mythical antediluvian kings and gives them reigns of several tens of thousands of years. The first Sumerian king, Alulim and Eridu, is described as reigning for 28,800 years. So that was the board of my first modem. Followed by several later kings of smaller periods. In total, these antediluvian kings ruled for 241,200 years, from the time when the kingship was lowered from heaven to the time when the flood swept over the land. Excavations in Iraq have revealed evidence of localized flooding at Shiropak, modern Tel Farah in Iraq, and various other Sumerian cities, all dated to the same time. A layer of riverine sediments, radiocarbon dated to approximately 2900 BC, interrupts the continuity of settlement, extending as far north as the city of Kish. Polychrome pottery from the Jemdet Nisar period, which is 3000 to 2900 BC, for about 1,000 years. Sorry, about 100 years, my bad. Was discovered immediately below the Shiropak flood stratum. The flood, described in the Sumerian king list, is believed to have a historical basis and been dated to 2900 BC. Adding 240,200 years to 2900 gives the date 24,100. So, sorry, 244,100
We'll get there.
BC.
We'll get there.
I'll get there. I can edit that out in post. However, most modern scholars do not believe the ancient Sumerians or Babylonians believed in a chronological or a chronology of their own this old. Instead, they believe that these figures were either fabrications or were based on not literal solar years, which were 365.245 days, 2425 days, but instead lunar months of 29 days, or 29 and a half. That's just trying to make the maths work. That's what that is. If this is true, then we need to divide everything by roughly 15. Let's make it 20 just to be safe, because the maths is easier, which gives Alulim and Eridu's rule of 1440 years. Hey, that's still longevity, right? That's not 200 years. Cicero, reacting to the chronologies of such authors as Berossos, who compared a Greek language history of Babylonia known as the Babyloniaca during the 3rd century BC, strongly criticized the claim that Babylonians had kings going back hundreds of thousands of years. And there's a quote from it. It says, "Let us scorn the Babylonians, the men whose records, as they themselves assert, cover a period of 470,000 years. Diodorus Siculus also wrote something similar about how he believed the Babylonians fabricated their chronology. A man can scarcely believe them, Babylonians, for they reckon that down to Alexander's crossing over into Asia, it had been 473,000 years since they began in early times to make their observations of the stars." To be honest, despite these criticisms, some ancient Greeks, including most notably Alexander Polycus and Proclus, believed the Babylonian kings were hundreds of thousands of years old, and that the Babylonians dated their creation of 400 to 200,000 before their own time. Now, just before we get to Persian, I wanted to say this time frame matches that of the Sumerians, right? And the African nations' belief of how old it was, how long ago it was that the Anunnaki came down. It seems to me to match perfectly. And as Mackey's Mayfly example, it should be that we don't question it. We accept it for what it is. And we don't look at it as we're the be-all and end-all of existence and know everything.
And that's our greatest downfall, to make us, ourselves, the yardstick for everything, which is a complete fallacy. Just on that, though, on the chronology, we had an interesting comment from Omega Logos in the chat as well.
As usual. Thank you, Omega.
No, it's good. I think it's he, so if it's a she, I do apologize. But he says that society was matriarchal, and therefore they counted the months as years. Now, again, I have no contention with that, and this is in fact something that we just shared with you as well in the text. Having said that, even if we do that, right, the rule of Alulim and Eridu still comes to 1,440 years. That's not how long they lived. That's how long they ruled. 1,440 years. Even if we assume that the number they were giving us was months instead of years. So it is a significantly big number, right? That's really what I'm trying to say to everybody here. It is a number that is astoundingly big, and speaks to a lifespan that's well beyond our present day grasp or reach. And again, taking ourselves as the yardstick for everything is a complete and utter fallacy. We're not. We're just here. I mean, it's funny. You get real perspective when you're up high, and especially when you're flying or you're watching satellite image or whatever it might be, right? You understand, especially if you're watching satellite image or even images from the International Space Station, you can see how thin the atmosphere is, relatively speaking, right? If you look at the world is massive, right? It unfolds under you. But the atmosphere is a very thin layer in comparison to the overall mass of the Earth. And the crust we inhabit is also, it's eggshell thin compared to the rest of the planet. So it goes down, hundreds of kilometers, but it is thin. It's a thin shell by comparison to the overall mass of the Earth. We think, at least, right? And we are on top of that shell, the eggshell, if you will, right?
Yeah, we live in an even thinner. It would be like the polish on the eggshell. If we polished an eggshell, is what we live inside.
Yeah, that's right. I recently purchased a USB microscope online, which came yesterday.
Oh, awesome!
Yeah, no, it is quite. You can take pictures. It works with any image capturing software that you have. So whatever you're using, it'll just give you an image, which is cool. But my point here is that things that look very, very smooth are in fact not. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. The globe, the Earth, compared to a billiard ball, is completely smooth. So a billiard ball, if you magnified it to the size of the Earth, pick any billiard ball on any billiard table in the world, pick it up, and you increase its size until it's the size of the Earth, it will be more rugged and ridgy and uneven than our Earth is.
The undulations are larger than 10 times Everest.
Oh, 100%. See, that. Look, I think hopefully that gives you a visual guide as to what we're dealing with here. So, again, now the reason I'm saying all of this is because when you look down upon the Earth and you see people walking around, and if you're in a very tall building, and look down, and people seem like ants. Really, I mean, we scurry about, we do our thing, we seem, and ants do the same thing. So from our perspective, I look down at an ant street or an ant hive. They're busy, they're doing stuff, right? And if someone that was maybe as big as we are in comparison to ants and looked at us and go, oh, well, there's a whole bunch of little humans scurrying about, God knows what they're doing, right? But in a similar way as we don't describe individual lives or individual ambitions to ants, someone that would be much bigger than us might think, well, clearly they're just little critters, and who cares what happens to them, right? Because we have this in our mind, we have this dismissal switch for anything that's smaller than us, is significantly smaller, right? So it is something worth remembering. And as Dave said, the mayfly lives a day, and we live 100 years, and a turtle, or a sea turtle, a large one, lives for hundreds of years. Some trees live for thousands of years. So different creatures, different critters, different life forms have different lifespans. And we are not the pinnacle of this. Our year, and again, I know I keep saying this, but our year, we go around the sun in 12 of our months, what we like to call months, but the whole, the whole motion around the sun, we call a year. There's 12 of those months, right? Completely arbitrary. It's different for every planet. Yeah, but look at the solar system. Every planet will have a different year, completely different year. And then you go to other solar systems, right, which will be vastly different from ours, I would imagine, right? And they have different time measures. If there were ever visitors coming from those systems to us, they could tell us, "Oh, I'm 2 years old," and you go, "Okay, that's in my context. That means you're a child. You're a baby, in fact." But in that context, for the person, the 2 years that they're calling a rotation around their sun could be 2,000 of our years, all right? So again, it's what we choose to call things, but it might take 2,000 of our years for their planet to go around the sun that they inhabit.
I've got something else to add to this.
Inhabit that goes from their sun.
So, Meki, did you know that from the day that we discovered Pluto, for instance, which was back in 1930, and how long the Pluto year is of 248 years?
It's very long.
It hasn't made a single revolution yet since we've discovered it. It won't make that until 2178.
Yeah.
Now, I hope to put some context on it for you.
Yeah. What we choose to look at as absolutes, like years and our age and things like that, even our size, our physical size. Oh, look at these things. They're, wow, this is incredible. Well, some things are incredible, others are not incredible. I mean, do I believe there were Homo sapiens or human-like creatures bigger than us? Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Not a doubt in my mind. Why do I say that? Because I look at a shark today, and a shark is a certain size, even a great white shark. That's a pretty nasty beast. They're big, right? But there's a megalodon, a shark, which means a big tooth shark, that dwarfs a great white point. Like it'll fit in its mouth. It'll just eat it with one bite. Is it still a shark? Yes, it is still a shark. But the size of it is enormous, right? Why could human beings not be bigger? Oh, because there's certain limits to the organs and the bones, only within our contextual reference.
Yes.
If we grow bigger with our chromosomes, our genetic makeup, yeah, absolutely, there'll be some issues. And we know that people that grow to very high heights have all kinds of problems with their joints and bones and whatnot. Absolutely, I see that. But if as a species, you're designed to be that big, then you don't have that issue. And I guarantee you that this megalodon, the shark, which might still exist, by the way, didn't have any of those issues, right? I'm sure it was the apex predator in the oceans in its time, right? So we cannot assume that we are the yardstick of all things, because we're not. Which brings me to the Persian Empire. The reigns of several shahs, or kings in the Persian context, in the Shahnameh, which is an epic poem by Ferdowsi, are given as longer than a century. There was Zahak, who ruled for 1,000 years, Yamshid, 700 years, Fereydun, 500 years, Ascani, 200 years, Kai Kavus, 150 years, Manucher, 120 years, Lorasp, 120, and Gosh-Tasp, also 120 years. Now, what that means is here, clearly, their longevity wore off over time, quite significantly, in fact. Dave?
Yeah. So the Roman Empire, in Roman times, Pliny wrote about longevity records from the census carried out in 74 AD. Good on him for having a census. That's data mining, if you ask me. It's big data. Under Vespasian is where it was. In one region of Italy, many people allegedly lived past 100. 4 were said to be 130. Others even older. The ancient Greek author of Lucian is the presumed author of Macrobi, or by, long livers, it means, a work devoted to longevity. Most of the examples Lucian gives are what would be regarded as normal lifespans. That's 80 to 100 years. Tiresias, the blind seer of Thebes, was alive for over 600 years, says Lucian. Nestor lived for over 300 years, once again, Lucian. According to one tradition, Epimenides of Crete, 7th, 6th centuries BC, lived nearly 300 years.
I know, right? The Bible is not far behind, of course, in giving us long-lived progenitors. Yeah, Methuselah, as well as all Old Testament characters, were listed as living very long. In fact, very, very long, but only in antediluvian times, which is prior to the flood and the variety of Noahs that we discussed with you. And I'll just go through some of those with you. There's Methuselah, who lived for 969 years. Jared, 962. Noah himself, 950 years. Adam, 930 years. Seth, 912 years. Kenan, 910 years. Enos, 905 years. Mahalalel, 895 years. Lamech, 777 years. Shem, 600 years. Ab, 464 years. Now, let's just gather our thoughts for a second here. so who was? Now, these are very long-lived people. They're not immortals. They're very long-lived, or at least we think that most of them were not immortal. They may very well have been. We only know about that particular lifespan. Certainly, the ancient king lists of the Sumerians and Babylonians only give us the reign, really, of those kings rather than their lifespan. It could be assumed that they die at the end of their reign, but that's an assumption that could be fallacious as well. It could be a fallacy. It could be wrong there, right? So let's not necessarily make that assumption. They may well have lived after having been king for a time because they just didn't want to be king anymore. So, but who really is then considered immortal? Who are the ones that are indisputably immortal and have always been so throughout all our histories, mythologies, and folklore? Well, those are the gods and the demigods and people who were made immortal by the gods. We're gonna talk about that in a little while, somewhat more. But right now, we want to talk about the science behind this. Why do we die? Why do we die? Well, I mean, what's the advantage of dying? I mean, really, like individually, there really isn't. Evolutionary, well, it could be argued that you're making room for the next generation. What if you didn't have that pressure? What if you didn't have that pressure of making room for the next generation? What if you were truly, I don't know, interstellar species? Would you still need to die? Well, I want to say no. I want to say no, because it is no longer a biological necessity to make space for the next generation. So we're going to talk about telomeres, and a few articles here that we want to share with you, and there's some updated ones as well. We're going to talk about cell division and the gene kill switch just before we do that, though. So the reason we die is because, unless we're hit on the head by a rock, right? I'm talking about natural death now, right? Old age death, and the death that is the accumulation of all the things that go wrong with our body, all right? I'm not talking about accidents, violent death, being in a war or drowning, any of those. That's just what happens. No, I'm talking about if you could avoid all accidents, all wars, all violent attacks, you would still die. The answer, so the question is, well, why? Why do I die? Why? Doesn't seem reasonable. Well, the reason is that our cells, from the very moment we are conceived, divide. Right? So we are the product and the continuing product of cell division. As we're young and grow, our bodies grow and a lot of new cells are created and put into the right places. That's part of the genetic code. So a cell knows when it needs to become a liver cell, and all of those cells are stem cells. A stem cell is a cell that is undifferentiated, meaning it could become anything that you want it to become. Usually it becomes the thing that it's closest to in your body, right? If you send a whole bunch of stem cells into your liver that might be failing, chances are the stem cells would help repair it. And that's some of the medical treatments we're looking at today in the world. Sorry, go ahead. Okay.
I didn't say anything.
Wow, there was someone is on the line. Anyway, so now this cell division though is a flawed process. Think of it as a copy you make on a copy machine, right? Let's say you've got the pristine original. It might be a nice color page of whatever, and you put it in your copier, and you copy it off, right? Now all the copies that come from the original one, they will be pretty good. They'll be pretty good copies, right? But eventually that original cell is going to die, right? So you only have the copy left. Right, so now you have to make a copy of the copy, and on it goes. But each time you make a copy, the copy gets just a little bit worse for wear. It's maybe not as crispy anymore. The letters aren't as clear. The colors aren't coming through as nicely. And eventually, after a few thousand of these divisions, the copy that you have left with is pretty ordinary, right? It's still functional, but it's pretty ordinary. Now, the same thing happens with our cells. Our cells divide and divide, and in each division, a little damage is done to something called telomeres. Now, the telomeres are in fact the genetic material that hangs at the end of our DNA strands, right? People say, oh, it doesn't have a purpose, doesn't do anything. Well, I disagree. I mean, the obvious key reason for it being there, it protects all the genetic information in our DNA in the copying process, because as the copying goes on, the DNA strands get shorter. It is the effect of the cell division, and the telomeres are designed to protect the actual information that keeps your body alive and well and functioning correctly, right? But those get shorter and shorter as you get older and older, and each division comes along. The telomeres are getting shorter to the point where they can no longer protect the code that makes up your body. So the code is now expressed incorrectly because some DNA code that is vital for your functioning is no longer copied correctly because it has been damaged in the copying process because the telomeres are gone, right? So it could lead to cell mutations and can lead to malfunctioning organs, if you've got enough copying mistakes. And that's what happens. That's why we die. That's the only reason we die, unless we get hit by a rock in the head.
And that imperfection occurs at every cell level in your body.
All the time. Completely. Yeah, absolutely. It does. And in fact, it can be, look, if you take drugs and alcohol and you treat your body like an amusement park rather than a temple, then you're actually accelerating that. I mean, the more poison you add to your body, the quicker you die. That's just the way it works, right? But even if you lived a perfectly healthy life, now you probably live a lot longer than most people, but even if you lived a perfectly healthy life, you would still die. Doesn't sound fair, right? Because your telomeres will still shorten. Now, there's actually something, an enzyme, believe it or not, called telomerase. Telomerase protects the telomeres in the copying process, meaning as the cells get copied, telomerase acts as an insulator, so the telomeres do not become shortened or damaged in the copying process. However, telomerase is switched off at some point in your life, and it does no longer protect the telomeres. Why do you say is that? And a whole bunch of people tell you, oh, that's so we don't die from cancer. Well, let's be clear here, though, right? And I'm happy to be corrected by any doctor or oncologist that is listening to this. A cancer cell, once it mutates, switches on the telomerase. Mm-hmm. It's not that the telomerase becomes switched on and the cell then turns into a cancer cell, right? No, but as soon as the cell mutates into what we, I guess, call a cancer cell these days, it switches on the telomerase because the cancer cell, for all intents and purposes, then becomes immortal. Mm-hmm. Right? Like it's a cell that similar to a stem cell, just does it just grows. It grows and it's there. It can be anything it wants. Unfortunately, the only thing it wants to be is a cancer cell, right? So that's the problem with a cancer cell. It's a mutated cell, but that is now protected by telomerase, right? So these cells, I mean, so these cells would not, in fact, age and die, but each copy of the cancer cell will be as perfect as the original one because it's protected. I like to call the turning off of the telomerase the gene kill switch. Mm-hmm. At some point, I'd say, maybe even prior to the flood, and I know, again, people will tell me, there was no flood, you're crazy, blah, 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 it's a localized...
Oh, there was a flood, all right.
I'm listen to the show on it, and listen specifically, not just the show where we give you some of the scientific evidence for it, which is very, very interesting, but listen to the show where we go through all the mythologies. And it's not the similarities that convince me; it is the differences. Right? There's an event, and if everybody was called Noah or something similar, and they all put the animals on the ark, I'd say, you know what? It's a story that was retold. That's 100%. Right. It's cultural cross-contamination. No issue there at all whatsoever. Got it. Understood. It is not that. We have such a variety of survivors and means of survival, it boggles the mind. Well, actually, it shouldn't boggle the mind because, clearly, you will have different modes of survival. One of them actually talked about this big metal sphere or ship coming down from heaven to take them up to help them, believe it or not. Others survived underground. Others survived in hollow trees or they in boats, but only very few. Or mountains, yeah, only very few. And those would be cross-cultural contamination have survived the way that Noah did. Mostly, that Noah myth is based on Utnapishtim actually going way back to Babylon, right? The original Noah was Utnapishtim, and that story is a lot more detailed than the Noah story in the Bible. So, if you get the chance, either listen to the show or go and look it up yourself. It's fascinating. So anyway, so that's.
Hey, Mickey, what about the story? What about the story where the guy was warned in his town by the angels, right? And warned of this flood, and he started building a boat, and the people in the town destroyed the boat.
Yeah.
right? They destroyed it. And yet this metal ship came down to save not only him, but anyone else that was there. Wow. So, I mean, you honestly, you can't make this stuff up. All these different stories from all around the world. And then the result of the story wasn't, and they lived happily ever after, right? Having survived the flood. Yeah, they had a hard time trying to come back from the flood, right? Yeah. Food was stuff. But that the people that had survived only had offspring which survived.
Correct.
So the pre-flood people were saved in some circumstances, especially, and where it's documented, to never return. They were saved but weren't brought back. They were saved and their offspring were placed back on the earth.
That's right. It was almost a complete restart. Omega Logos believes that it's not pronounced telomerase, but telomerase. Now, I'm German, so I will pronounce telomerase, but Dave is more than welcome to pronounce it telomerase. So that's all good. Yeah. But yeah, no, telomerase.
There, I see. I did it. Thank you very much, Omega.
For me, it's telomerase. Telomerase. Yeah. So that's what it is for me, and Dave will do the Australian pronunciation. Now, okay,
and it was 2009 Nobel Prize for Medicine where this was just found and finally made public.
Yeah, that's right. Now, this is a really interesting article, which was part of the original show as well. You know, it was almost 6 years ago, actually 7 years ago now. And from the website called ViewZone, and the actual article is called Aging. A few more thoughts on why we die. Why do we age and die? The cause of what we call aging is now being understood. This new understanding may soon move anti-aging cosmetics and surgery to the ranks of snake oil and Siberian yogurt as life extension fads, but not yet. There are a few obstacles that need to be addressed. Immortality has silently been revealing itself to scientists like Dr. John Langmore of the University of Michigan's Department of Biology. Dr. Langmore and his group looked inside human cells at the very essence of human life, the DNA molecule. Specifically, Dr. Langmore looked at the tips of the DNA molecule, a previously overlooked part of the double helix molecule that contain a kind of chain of repeating pairs of enzymes. Called telomeres, these molecular chains have often been compared to the blank leaders on film and recording tape. Indeed, telomeres seem to perform a similar function. During the replication process, the spiral DNA molecule must split in half and reassemble a copy of itself. Protecting the vital DNA molecule from being copied out of sync, telomeres provide a kind of buffer zone, where misalignments, which are inevitable, will not result in any of the important DNA code being lost. As any cell gets older, it is under attack by oxides and free radicals and drugs and whatnot, I mentioned it earlier, in the body and environment. We survive as living beings because our cells have the ability to duplicate and replace themselves before being killed by these natural causes. Each time our cell divides, the DNA molecule makes a new copy of itself. But the procedure is very complex and not perfect. Usually a small portion of the DNA molecule is lost, misaligned, and not copied. Since errors are more frequent on the ends of the DNA molecule, this area, the telomere, does not contain any important DNA information, and the effect is insignificant. Dave?
Telomeres, or programmed to die. Scientists observe that the length of the telomere chains becomes shorter as we grow older. Eventually, the telomeres become so short that cell replication produces lethal errors or missing pieces in the DNA sequence, ending the cell's ability to replicate itself. This point, when the cell has lost vital DNA code and cannot reproduce, is called the Hayflick limit. It is the measure of how many times a cell can copy itself before it dies. Some cells in our body have a very high Hayflick limit. Cells that line the inside of your mouth and intestines, for example, are constantly being worn away and replaced. Indeed, these cells appear to have the ability to regrow telomeres even in aged bodies. Scientists were curious why some cells shut down telomere growth with age and some do not. Dr. Langmore used physical, biochemical, and genetic techniques to study the structure and function of telomeres. His group developed a cell-free system to reconstitute functional modal telomeres using synthetic DNA, and studied the mechanism by which telomeres normally stabilize chromosomes and how shortening of the telomeres could cause instability. The protein factors responsible for stabilizing the ends of the chromosomes are being identified, cloned, and studied. Electron microscopy is used to directly visualize the structure of the model telomeres. Dr. Langmore's group used a new enzymatic assays to determine the structure of telomere DNA in normal and abnormal cells grown in vivo or in vitro in order to address specific hypotheses about the role of telomeres in aging and cancer. It's exciting research for sure, and there has been some promising discoveries. Scientists have discovered an important enzyme that can turn the telomere production on the DNA molecule on and off. It's called telomerase. Not surprisingly, it seems that we get older. It seems that as we get older, the amount of telomerase in our cells decreases. Mackie. In your own time, Mackie? To Mackie.
And I was talking to mute. The cancer problem, or the cancer problem. Here we go. You might be wondering why biologists don't simply find a way to keep our body's telomeres long. This would prevent replication errors, and humans could live indefinitely. The big problem is cancer. Usually, if a cell makes an error in copying itself, the error will prevent the cell from duplicating itself in the future. So the mistake is limited. But with cancer, cells with errors somehow turn on the production of telomerase and make the mutant cells immortal. Now let me repeat this again. But with cancer, cells with errors somehow turn on the production of telomerase and make the mutant cells immortal. Okay, so this is not somehow telomerase or telomerase gets turned on and these cells become mutants.
That's right.
It is the mutant cells turn on somehow telomerase or telomerase. I'm going to stick with telomerase because that's who I am. So it's that way, right? It's not the other way around. So I just want to read it out a few times to make it clear. This is not my statement. This is the statement of the article. Now, aberrant cells can reproduce unchecked and outlive normal cells. This is the process that creates tumors. No argument from me with that whatsoever. The key thing, and I have to repeat it again, I'm so sorry. But with cancer, cells with errors somehow turn on the production of telomerase and make the mutant cell immortal. Not the other way around. Not the other way around. Okay? Let's be very clear. So if telomerase was on all the time, it would not increase our cancer risk. It would, in fact, in my opinion, reduce it. Because cells are less likely to mutate if there's nothing wrong in the copying process.
Bingo.
Does that logic make sense to everybody, or is it just me? Dave is with me, I'm sure.
No, I'm with you.
Right? I know.
It's you and I. That's 2 against 7.7 billion, but we're all right.
We're okay. Now, this is important. Since we all have mutant precancerous cells in our bodies, and we have them all the time, by the way, nature has decided to shut off the telomerase as we age, thus preventing these mutant cells from growing telomeres. No! It's exactly the opposite. Yes? The opposite. Not.
He's saying it here. He's saying it now, right now, here on the radio. That's what he's saying.
It's actually the exact other way around. Other way around. All right? So what we're saying is nature somehow decided we're going to turn off telomerase or telomerase, and therefore that'll solve the cancer problem. No, it's the exact opposite problem. You turn it off, you encourage cell mutation, okay, by shortening the telomeres. You encourage it by not being able to have the telomeres repaired. You're encouraging cancer. That's what you're doing. That's what causes our death eventually, having it switched off.
But Mackie, this kind of programmed death, it's a trade-off, right?
Well, sorry, let's go back to the text. It's a kind of programmed death, yes, you're right. And it's a trade-off to reduce our lifespan in order to save us from being riddled with tumors. Bullshit, I call it again. I'm sorry. I feel very passionate about this because...
I call BS on it too.
Yeah, if scientists truly believe this, then the research is going in all the wrong directions. Nevertheless, some precancerous cells manage to reactivate the telomeres, and this has caused the research to focus more on blocking telomere production rather than trying to extend it. Well, this is, like I'm saying, it's the exact opposite. Wrong! Anti-cancer researchers believe that by introducing a molecule to block this groove, the telomerase would become unable to attach itself to the DNA, thereby limit the length of telomere production. While this work holds hope for stopping tumor cells from producing or reproducing forever, it does little to extend healthy cells from being rejuvenated. Yeah, okay, I get it. If you can stop telomerase production in cancer cells, that's a good thing. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. I completely agree. But anyway, I'm getting too excited. However, if the molecular blocker could specifically target only cancerous cells without blocking telomerase or telomerase activity in healthy cells, it could be a step towards human life extension. Yes, if and when a pharmaceutical can be developed that activates telomerase in the body, telomerase. Now, let's think about this for a second. So that again, they want to develop some kind of drug that will activate it. I think it's more fundamental. I think it's a genetic problem. The drug would be helpful, sure enough, but we have to find the genetic trigger that switches off telomerase. We have to find the genetic trigger. Getting a medication, that's nice and dandy. What is the trigger?
They're going to sell us something, Mackie. Big Pharma's going to sell us something, right?
Oh, of course. Now, Dr. Langmore explains the following. I'm quoting from him. Telomeres are special, essential DNA sequences at both ends of each chromosome. Each time chromosomes replicate, a small amount of the DNA at both ends is lost by an uncertain mechanism. See, it's that mechanism that we need to figure out. Mm-hmm. Because human telomeres shorten at a much faster rate than many lower organisms, we speculate that this telomere shortening probably has a beneficial effect for humans, namely mortality. A beneficial effect, mortality.
That's right. That's crazy talk.
That's the most. Anyway, I know I'm not going to profane the telomere.
Hang on. I got to ask the question. How is mortality beneficial? Trust me, right? So it's rhetorical.
Yeah. Look. With limited resources in a finite system, mortality is not just a benefit; it's an absolute necessity, right? It is because if you put another 30 billion people on this planet, it'll be horrible. But like I said, if we all were sensible, if we actually explored interstellar or even interdimensional space, it would no longer be a necessity or even a benefit. Going back to Dr. Langmore's explanation, the telomere hypothesis of aging postulates that as the telomeres naturally shorten during the lifetime of an individual, a signal or set of signals is given to the cells to cause the cells to cease growing, which is called senescence or cell death. At birth, human telomeres are about 10,000 base pairs long. But by 100 years of age, this has been reduced to about 5,000 base pairs. Telomerase is actually an enzyme, a catalytic protein for those that want to know, that is able to arrest or reverse this shortening process. Normally, telomerase is only used to increase the length of telomeres during the formation of sperm and perhaps eggs, thus ensuring that our offspring inherit long, young telomeres to propagate the species.
Well, there's a couple of articles here, and we'll get through a couple of them. So, End of Aging and Cancer. Scientists unveil structure of the Immortality enzyme telomerase. This is from April 2018, this year, right? A new discovery related to our DNA is raising hopes we could soon slow aging and cure cancer. Scientists say. Well, it's only 9 years old, but that's all right, right? We'll just keep going. Scientists say age isn't a reliable gauge of health. Making a drug is like trying to pick a lock at the molecular level. There are two ways in which you can proceed. You can try thousands of different keys at random, hopefully finding one that fits. The pharmaceutical industry does this all the time, sometimes screening hundreds of thousands of compounds to see if they interact with a certain enzyme or protein. But unfortunately, it's not always efficient. Doesn't sound efficient to me. There are more drug molecule shapes than seconds have passed since the beginning of the universe. Whoa. Alternatively, like a safecracker, you can X-ray the lock you want to open and work out the probable shape of the key in the pictures you get. This is much more effective for discovering new drugs. And it does go on. At the end of each chromosome, we know this one. Where do I go?
Keep going with it. No. Take the whole thing.
All right, you got it. Alternatively, now a study published in Nature presents detailed images of a crucial anti-aging enzyme known as telomerase, raising hopes that we could soon slow aging and cure cancer. I like how they did that too. Every organism packages its DNA into chromosomes. In simple bacteria like E. coli, this is a single small circle. More complex organisms have far more DNA and multiple linear chromosomes. Like us, we have 22 pairs, plus sex chromosomes, it's the X and the Y. These probably appeared because they provided an evolutionary advantage, or they were modified, but they also come with a downside. At the end of each chromosome is a protective cap called a telomere, sort of like the little plastic cap on the end of your shoelaces. However, most human cells can't copy them, meaning that every time they divide, the telomeres become shorter. When telomeres become too short, the cells enter a toxic state called senescence. If these senescent cells are not cleared by the immune system, they begin to compromise the function of the tissues in which they reside. For millennia, humans have perceived this gradual compromise in tissue function over time without understanding what caused it. We simply call it aging. It's our demise, slow demise after about 35. Enter telomerase, a specialized telomere repair enzyme in two parts, able to add DNA to the chromosome tips. The first part is a protein called TERT, T-E-R-T, that does the copying. The second component is called TR, it's a small piece of RNA which acts as a template. Together, these form telomerase, which trundles up and down on the ends of the chromosomes, copying the template. At the bottom, a human telomere is roughly 3,000 copies of DNA sequence, TTAGGG, laid down and maintained by telomerase. But sadly, production of TERT is repressed in human tissue, with the exception of sperm, eggs, and some immune cells. Mackie, take us through aging versus cancer.
I will do. Aging versus cancer. Organisms regulate their telomere maintenance in this way because they are walking a biological tightrope. On the one hand, they need to replace the cells they lose in the course of their ordinary daily lives by cell division. However, any cell with an unlimited capacity to divide itself is the seed of a tumor. And it turns out that the majority of human cancers have active telomerase and shorter telomeres than the cells surrounding them. This indicates that the cell from which they came divided as normal, but then picked up a mutation which turned TERT back on. Cancer and aging are flip sides of the same coin, and telomerase, by and large, is doing the flipping. Inhibit telomerase, and you have a treatment for cancer. Yes, in cancer cells, correct. Activate it, and you prevent senescence. That, at least, is the theory, and I completely agree with that. This will inhibit, inhibiting telomerase can treat cancer, yes. But if you activate it, you prevent senescence. In my opinion, you also prevent the onset of cancer. The researchers behind the new study were not just able to obtain the structure of a proportion of the enzyme, but of the entire molecule as it was working. This was a tour de force involving the use of cryo-electron microscopy, a technique using a beam of electrons rather than light to take thousands of detailed images of individual molecules from different angles and combine them computationally. Prior to the development of this method, for which scientists won the Nobel Prize last year, in 2017, so this is brand new, guys, this is hot off the press, it was necessary to crystallize proteins to image them. This typically requires thousands of attempts and many years of trying, if it works at all, because you could, in the crystallization process, quite easily damage or destroy the protein. I don't think we have a lot of time left.
No, I don't think so.
So we'll do the article again. That's how we start next week with this article. But this is what has been happening most recently. There's more to this article, so we'll share that with you next week. But we are finally getting, or science is getting to the bottom of this. And Dave, what I think, if we know this now, if this is information being released to us now, I have a sneaking suspicion that this was probably information that existed or has existed for quite some time. What it brings to mind is the use of monatomic gold or orme, because apparently that substance is also or could be used to protect or regrow telomeres, if legend has it right. So that's why the gods are so obsessed with gold, because through a certain process you can turn gold into this monoatomic element, which is really like a white powder from all intents and purposes, which you can then ingest. And that would absolutely be an elixir of youth. It would absolutely be your means to stay, well, for all intents and purposes, immortal, right, Dave? So it's...
Yes, completely. And that's one of the things that makes this so interesting, is the fountain of youth, the pharaohs created bread which kept them smart and alive. You can only imagine all of these things. It was called mufkat then, or mana, and you didn't worship the gods. You worshipped them. You worked for them, providing this for them. And you want your leaders to be smart. You want them to make the right decisions and to be healthy and last for a long time. And maybe that's what it was. Maybe that's all it is. But the real question, the pre-flood, antediluvian, and the post-flood, human is different. That the tales are that we were made to be mortal, no longer immortal, by turning off telomerase.
Yeah.
We can't be long from the break if it's not already started. Let me just check. It's a tough thing now. We can and can't hear it sometimes. Hang on. Yeah, there it is. The music's there. We'll see you next week. Stay tuned for a roundtable with Jer Bear, and stay tuned and stay safe. Keep your eyes open.
Listen to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.